Again, good morning. This month's topic is the brand new Honeywell CIPer Model 30 IP controller. Thought I'd start with an overview of some of the bullet points, the important things on the controller software as such. And if something's not there, please speak up and ask. And we've got Vince Kelly on the line too from Honeywell that is going to keep me straight and hopefully be interjecting things as well, because the two of us have been through the training. I had gone through the training last week and thought this was a good time to cover the CIPer 30, and I think it's an evolving product, so we may do some future sessions as well on this topic. So I guess to start, the CIPer 30 is built on Niagara 4. It does have the full Niagara stack, so everything you were used to using with Niagara or with the Jace you have here. The web server, you've got your alarming, your scheduling, your histories, you have your normal Niagara logic with kit control and all that, your PX pages, and Niagara analytics, everything as you would in a Jace. It's just certain things will be limited with licensing, which we'll cover some of that as well. The controller itself has onboard I/O, 12 points. There's 3 universal inputs, which will take resistance, specifically 20K and 10K. Discrete, it can do all the inputs can do fast pulse. I say 3 universal inputs, but it's actually 6. But 3 of them share with analog outputs. So the analog output, or the universal input 4, 5, and 6 are also what you would designate as your analog output 1, 2, and 3. So if you need an analog output, you lose your universal input. Is how that works. The digital outputs are solid state relays, 1.5 amps and 3.5 amp inrush at 24 volts. And because they're solid state, they're very fast acting. There's no problem using them for floating and for pulse width modulation control. Analog outputs do 0 to 10 volts DC, 10 milliamps max. They do not do milliamp output. And as I mentioned, the analog outputs are part of 3 of the universal inputs. And if we go back a screen, not sure if you can really see it, but in the bottom, you've got universal input 1, 2, 3, and then UI 4, 5, and 6, or analog output 1, 2, and 3. The base licensing includes 150 global points and 4 devices. And of those 4 devices, 1 is itself, and you can have 3 additional IP devices, BACnet IP, meters, VFDs, that sort of thing. It's licensed for BACnet IP server and client, so you could set up the export table in BACnet and actually have this act as a BACnet device to a BACnet system if there was a need to. I mentioned it's got the 3 IP device as the base license, which can be expanded. You can expand up to 312 points max, so you can actually add 300 more points to the license. Or you can add up to 312. You already get 150, so you could add another 150 to it. You get 10 analog or 10 analytics points, as you do on the Jaces when you buy them new. And it also includes the SMA, the software maintenance agreement. And with this, it's a one-time, you buy it, it comes with it, and for the life of Niagara 4, upgrades are part of that. Unlike the Jace 8000, where you have your software maintenance agreement is 1, 3, or 5 year in length, and you got to renew it. On the software side, it supports the Niagara logic kit control, usually refer to it, and that's usually that's where we pull our control logic from. And also Spyder-like function blocks. It's actually, for the most part, the Spyder library, or the Spyder palette, the Spyder tool palette function blocks are represented here in the CIPer 30 as well, with a few tweaks with It'll be some changes, and we'll show that live when we get through this. And if you remember, in a Spyder, you had 200 function blocks in a BACnet controller, and you had 300 function blocks that you could use in a lawn Spyder. With the CIPer 30, you can have roughly 2,500 function blocks, if not more. There's handoff auto switches on all the outputs, and it does have, there's a status point for each one, so you do have feedback if somebody goes up and flips the switch, or flips the switch and they turn the pot that's on the analog outputs. And does not also, the other part it doesn't have is when you go to do the override in software, in software on an actual physical output, you do not have a permanent duration to choose from. So usually you have permanent and then 1 minute, 5 minutes, an hour, or whatever, or custom. You can't permanently put those outputs into override. And that's in software, the software part. Sylk bus is part of this device as well. You can utilize the TR40 series and the TR7175, and in the future the TR120, which is the color display that is part of the Honeywell CIPer product line. Vince, was there any timeline for that you remember?
Frank, I think they said they were trying to get that out with the next release, which you know how that goes, but I would say that was sometime in the fourth quarter.
Okay. So hopefully by year end, that'll be available as well. There is a micro SD card slot built into the device. Right now it's turned off. They haven't actually turned on that feature. It doesn't do like you have in an 8000. It's not the license and all that. It's basically a place, if you put a card in, you'd have to purchase one and put it in just a standard micro SD card. You can set it up so you'll have automatic backups periodically, every 24 hours or whatever, can save to that card. Or if you have, I don't know, 50 VAVs you want to deploy, and you have 3 different applications, where you could have an image for 3 different images, put them on the SD card, the station, put it in that controller. When you power it up, it's going to load that station into the controller. So it's performing 2 functions. One is to be able to deploy a new station. The other is for automatic backups. And it's not in the current release. That's something that in one of the hopefully near future they'll be turning that on to allow us to be able to do that. There is a Spyder application migration utility built into this as well. You can actually migrate at the Spyder library backup level, the Spyder library level, or a complete station. So if you got a station with a bunch of Spyders on it, you can turn around, run the utility, it'll upgrade that station and basically replace the Spyders with the CIPer 30 in its place.
And 4 station.
And 4 station, yeah. 4.7 right now and above. And we'll go through that. I'll actually show some migrations that I had done and how it shows up in there. And also built on the controller is a 4-port gigabit unmanaged switch. And this switch actually supports, you can do star, daisy chain, and loop configurations. It actually is it follows and is a part of the rapid spanning tree protocol. And you can actually have a loop of up to 40 devices. They call it the diameter. So you could actually have 40 devices in a loop, and if you break the connection, if you cut the patch cable between 2 of the controllers, or you turn one of the controllers off, the rest of the controllers will still talk because of it being a loop. It has another path going back. And that's for up to 40 devices. And if you daisy chain these controllers, it's been tested at the factory with up to 120 devices. They're not saying that's a hard limit, but that's as far as they've tested it. I'm not sure why you'd want to do more than that or even that much to start with, but it can be done. Power requirements, I mean, they think they threw out a few different numbers in the class and the literature, depending on where you look, it's different. In the class, they talked about 9 VA minimum, plus the loads at a maximum of 100 VA. but in actuality, it's between 15 and 50 VA. So really, the minimum power for each controller is going to be 15 VA. And then depending on what you have connected and what loads you have on there, it could be more. Temperature range, 32 to 122 degrees. It has an onboard 20-volt DC power source, as the Spyder did, and I think it's the same amount of power, too. I think the Spyder was 75 milliamps.
Can't put this in a rooftop unit?
The protocol supported, you have BACnet IP, and again, client and server, Fox, FoxS, so you got secure Fox, HTTP, and you have HTTPS for your web server. And in the future, they're going to be adding a USB adapter Wi-Fi, so that you'll be able to actually have these controllers go Wi-Fi on them. There's actually two USB ports on the controller. The one is the old printer style, the more square-looking connector. That's used for shell. The other one is a standard USB connection, and right now it does nothing, and there hasn't been any talk of what it's for. So I'm assuming at some point that'll be the USB jack or plug for the for Wi-Fi. And there's also a pair of there's a terminal pair marked not applicable, and that's actually an that's a RS-45 port that's not used at this point, and I'm not sure if and when, if it's going to be used for it's going to bring in a couple BACnet MSTP devices, or if it's just not going to get used at all. There hasn't been any talk, and they just kind of stay away from it, that it's just, they're there, but do nothing.
Hey, Frank?
There's also, yeah.
Hey, Frank, it's Vince. Are you sitting with Greg?
I am.
Is that
sitting
Greg?
with Greg?
I heard in the background somebody asked something about you. Heard somebody say you can't put this in a rooftop controller.
That's what I
You had a temperature range of 32 to 122?
Correct.
That's
what I meant when I...
The limitation on that is the microbridge airflow sensor, and that's the reason you can only go to 32. But I was told in the training, if you don't need that microbridge airflow sensor, and it's a simple pop in or pop out sensor off of the board, that you would get if you pop that out, you would be able to use the controller at its normal Spyder temperature ranges. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, actually it does. Looking at the product data sheet, the actual temperature range is -4 to 131 degrees. So I will update that.
I'm not a fan of putting electronics in rooftop units to begin with, but we have lots of contractors that like to stick these things in rooftop units, and that's a question we field a lot.
Understood. Thanks.
And then, as part of that, the controller, let's start out with, there's two models of the CIPer 30. You have the VAV model and you have the unitary model. VAV model has the built-in microbridge. Right now it's 0 to 2 inches range, and it's going to be very soon a bidirectional -2 to +2 inches. And the VAV model, you can't expand it. You can't add the expansion modules to it. On the unitary model, doesn't come with the microbridge, but you can add up to 15 of the expansion modules to the controller, whether they're plugged in direct or they're remote connected, and I have another slide for that. But you can see the point count on those. The large expansion module is 20 I/O, and the small is 7 I/O. And Vince, when you order these, you get an additional 50 points for the license, correct? I remember reading that somewhere, but it was never discussed in the training class.
No, that's a good question, Frank. I don't recall ever hearing that, but I'll check into that for you.
Okay. It might have been an older document that I had pulled that from.
How would it know?
So it would have to be somehow, that's what we were saying this morning. I'm not sure how, it would have to be somehow tied in when you purchase it, almost like a Jace, where you got a license as part of it that then gets applied to a CIPer 30, which seems like it'd be too much of a,
You're gonna get a new license.
it seems like it'd be too much of a hassle. You would think it would just be hardware only and you gotta buy the license separately, is what it really seems like it should be. So you have up to 15 expansion modules, and the actual, if you ask what's the protocol they're using, it's actually panel bus that's being used as the protocol for communicating with these modules. And currently it's just these two modules, the small and the large. Down the road, they are going to expand it to be able to have the standard panel bus devices like you have with the Eagle controller or you have with an XL800 type controller. But this can be plugged directly in the side of the CIPer, as shown here on the left side there. That's a large one plugged into the side, or you can plug a terminal, the 6-position terminal strip in the side, and you go up to 200 feet remotely for remote I/O if need be. And I think that's the standard range on panel bus.
Yeah.
And
So
Frank, just to mention, HOAs on every output on the expansion modules
On
as
the
well.
expansion modules. Yeah, all outputs, whether it's the controller or the expansion modules, you get the overrides, and also that they are supervised. They do provide feedback.
But you have the limitation where software override, there's no permanent duration.
Right. Right. And obviously with a switch, it's permanent until somebody puts it back to auto.
That might be.
I guess another thing to mention at this point with the training that we had last week, the expansion modules aren't available yet, so we didn't actually have an expansion module to play with in the class. I know that they're very close to having those available or ready to release anyway. Isn't that correct, Vince?
That is correct, Frank.
All right, so they were the points that I wanted to touch on. Before we go into the software, are there any questions about the physical part, the controller itself?
Hey, Frank, I think the one thing that I would like to add about that 4-port gigabit switch, there has been a lot of early discussions with the engineering community about using that very robust backbone for other IP devices that may be in the building, especially like schools where they have multiple IP devices in classrooms like voice over IP systems, intercom systems, clocks. The IT world, IT engineering community is getting a little excited about having these extra 2 ports sitting right there in a classroom or in a building near a VAV box, so that they can utilize that backbone without adding additional Cisco switches and things of that nature into their building. The savings of being able to do that and utilize that existing bus are real. If you guys talk to anybody in the IT world, they'll tell you that if you get yourself a 32-port, Cisco switch or something like that in a building, it's going to be $8,000 to $10,000. So I just wanted to point that out, that there's a lot of talk and a lot of discussion about utilizing those extra 2 ports on the controller for additional IP devices in buildings.
All right, that's a good point. And then also, there's a dedicated CPU for the switch. So, I mean, one of the things you hear people talk about what they call it, a broadcast storm, where all of a sudden there's so much traffic on there, it'll end up taking down the switch. Well, if you don't have a dedicated CPU for it, your controller is going to suffer as well, your logic and all. But since this has a dedicated CPU, you don't have that issue. And then when that was brought up, John Hutchie also mentioned they're looking at other things they can do with it because of it being a dedicated CPU. I asked the question, does that mean you can make it a managed switch as well? They didn't say no. They said, yeah, I guess it's something that could be could be done because of it being set up the way it is. So there's some, there may be some future things that they'll do with that switch to make it, I guess, more robust, especially if they're going to start doing dedicated ports for IP cameras and IP, card access or, anything else like that.
Hey, Frank, the other thing I would like to mention that I thought was pretty interesting, and you had called it out on one of your slides, but they have really beefed up the inputs and the outputs on this controller. I don't know if you saw, but Frank had mentioned there's a 16-bit A to D converter now instead of the 8-bit that we had on a Spyder. So that means the resolution is double or more on reading inputs, and the 0 to 10 volt analog output as well. I think, Frank, if I recall, that is now like in steps of 300 microvolts or something like that. So what that basic, I'm sorry?
You're correct.
Okay, so what that basically means is now, just for instance, if before between 0 to 10 volts we had, 100 step resolution, now we might have like 300 to 400 step resolution. So a lot beefier inputs and outputs, which, the benefit of that is we just get much, much better control. Thanks.
All right.
Hey,
so
Frank?
I figured, yeah.
I have another question. The universal input / analog output, is that configurable through software, or do you have to set a jumper in the device?
Software.
Okay.
All right, so I'm running the standard release of 4.7 plus the additional modules required for the CIPer 30. If we take a look, there are, actually the main, really the palette that's being used for this is the IPC programming tool. So basically IPC is IP controller programming tool. And if we take a look, just quickly going down, I'm going to skip a couple for now. You got your usual, your analog function blocks, and it's all, you'll notice it's basically what we use for Spyder.
Same category.
Yes, so that's the idea. The point was to try to make it similar. Easy to move from Spyder to here, to the CIPers. Also, I think it's done this way probably because of the migrator. It's probably easier to migrate it and having the same block names and whatnot. You'll notice one difference is on their build-ins, you don't have the Sylk devices anymore, so you have a separate category for the Sylk devices. You have the 7400S as well. The Sylk IO will not be, the Sylk IO modules will not be part of this. One of the biggest differences, and I'm going to probably jump to the Spyder migrator first, because I think that'll make it easier. But if you notice, we have these devices for the Sylk modules, for the ZIOs, but then you'll notice there's another one called Sylk parameters. And these should look familiar to you, but are part of the, in the Spyder, there's slots that are on the ZIO itself. So in this tool, in this controller, each of those slots on the ZIO become a separate parameter or a separate component or function block on your wire sheet. So instead of you having to go back and linking to the room temp slot on the ZIO, you could take the room temp function block and drop it in the folder that you're using room temp. This way you don't have this one object that's got 20 slots, so you have this huge block there with a bunch of links on it. I/O, very similar. Binary outputs are a little different because of the fact that they're solid state. Floating one as well. You'll see up here, there's expansion devices. So this expansion device here, if I double click on it, this is the device that's the expansion module, the small and the large module. If you look at the, we're used to seeing BACnet network or LAN network or Modbus network or whatever. The new network is called IPC network, again, IPC controller network. And you'll see a local device under there like you'd see on BACnet. The difference is this local device is your 30. Remember, it's running Niagara in that controller. So the local device is actually your controller. And from there you have, which model you're working with. There's a maintenance button on the front. It's actually the button that has like a wrench as the icon. It doesn't do anything other than it gives you a place to have a manual. You can set it up to do whatever you want with it. Trigger an alarm or whatever, so you can, press the button and you have access to it. I think down the road they'll have other uses for it as well, but for now that's what it's there to be able to do. If you're doing rapid spanning tree protocol, you got your settings for that, and that's a different subject for another Tech Tuesday. There's a flag in there that tells you if your Sylk devices were downloaded. Remember, this one of the things I should have had is a big bullet on the slides. Not like a Spyder that you needed to download. These are live programming like a Jace would be. So there is no downloading. So the only downloading there actually is to get the information to your ZIOs. So if you think about it, when you download a Spyder, one of the things it does is the Spyder then gets its ZIO piece gets downloaded into those sensors. So there's actually an action in there on the controller to allow you to download that to the ZIOs.
Okay.
So they give you a flag to say whether or not they were downloaded, and also a place to see what the power consumption is that you've used up on that.
Is it the same as a Spyder? In other words, the Sylk calculator.
It's beefier, but you can only have 4 ZIOs. I think it's really, you could actually have 4 TR-75s on the network if you wanted.
You could only have 1 on a Spyder.
Right, so you have some of those, so you can, still it's 4 max, and, they didn't say whether, I guess TR-42s it's be the same way, but I think you can do.
Well, if it has humidity and carbon dioxide, they're going to consume more power.
Right.
Not resources as much as power.
I think a lot of it's going to be, with us getting, bench time and playing with it and pushing the envelope and seeing where it can go.
That Sylk calculator is going to be strictly for Spyders. They're going to have something different.
I would assume they may, yes.
Those specs need to be available so that we could calculation.
So then underneath that local device, actually, instead of doing it from down there, I should just do it from up here. We go to that IPC network. Under that local device, there's a points folder like we're used to seeing in a Niagara station. Under there, you're going to find two folders. One's called Sequence Control Program. The other's called Event Control Program. The Sequence Control Program is basically the place where all that IPC programming tool, the logic, goes all into that folder. It is deterministic, and every block has a sequential order to it. So you actually, if we were to quickly look, you'll see execution order. So on this folder, this one executes before this one does. If you go to the next one, you'll see each block has an execution order. Niagara blocks don't do that. That's strictly something that's built in with this logic and with this for this controller and in this folder. The other folder, your event control program, this is where you'll use your typical Niagara logic, your kit control. You actually can come in here and build. You could do the whole job if you're used to doing Niagara programming. You can program that controller from the kit control blocks. or you stay in the other and you use your Spyder, or I knew I was going to do that, your CIPer 30 function blocks.
Both folders have access to the same
And
I/O?
you can share data back and forth. They have both have access to the hardware points. So you pull the hardware input in once, and then you can share it over to the other folder. So you can share between them.
Can't have both writing to the same output.
Right. Right. Expansion modules, when you drop them from the pallet, you just drop them on the local device themselves. And you can see here there's expansion 1 that I have in place. Don't have one yet, so it's down. Then you choose what the model is and what the address is. Simple as that.
Is that a physical address?
Yeah, 1 of 15.
You have to set it.
And then you could add your COs. So if we go down here, I can say, okay, I got a TR42 as well. I'm going to drop that on there. Actually, I should rename it. TR42. Actually, I did that totally wrong. Get rid of that. I didn't mean to put in that many of them. I really wanted to do was expand it. And I've got a TR42H on my board, so that's what I want to drop on the local device. So then when you open that up, you just tell it what the address is. And then there's other programming the TR42 doesn't really have any programming. It's more of if you go into a TR75, it's got programming. One of the fundamental changes between Spyder and the CIPer 30 programming, and it's something I would love to see Spyder move towards. You're all used to using the config view for setting up each of your function blocks, whether it's a ZO or it's a temperature set point.
And block, whatever.
So anything in the Spyder library, you always had to go to a config view to configure it. Within this, everything's a property sheet like we're used to doing with everything other than, the Spyder programming. So the TR75, you think about what you had in Spyder for that. In here, it's all done through the property sheet. And you got your schedule and you got your TR75s. And so one of the places I think you'll like seeing is if we go into here and you look at the PID, everything's in, this is so much easier than going into a config view and start making your changes. You'll see instead of having to put the limit block after your PID, if you're doing standard PID control, you now have a slot to tell it if you're using 0 to 100% or negative 200 to plus 200. That's a nice little added feature. But all the rest of your config information is the same with something like that. You go in and look at the temperature set point calculator. Everything's done again through the property sheet instead of the config view.
What are you doing about variables, in and outbound variables?
It's still, they do have pass-throughs that you can use in between.
No, like an NVI or an NCI.
It's a Niagara numeric writable or a Boolean writable.
So they pulled out of the palette?
You go in here and you can just do your new, like if you look through here, here's one here. I got an effective set point network output. Still call it network output, but it's really just a standard Niagara numeric writable that you're working with.
So you don't have to deal with all of the snippet types and all that other junk.
Right. And again, remember, you're really doing, it's Fox. Typically, it should be Fox Secure, Fox S. But you're going between controllers. Say, if it's a bunch of these are VAV versus an air handler, you're doing that communication to a secure means with Fox. and sharing data that way, so you're not worrying about having to, you're not doing a BACnet share or anything like that. You could just do a BACnet export to share it to maybe another BACnet IP device, if need be. But you'll notice in here, where's room temperature? Here's the room temperature block that you would normally see inside your ZIO. One of the things that's nice, one of the big differences, I'm sure many of you have gone in and had a TR-75 in an application you use over and over again, and all of a sudden you have a job, you need a TR-42 instead. You go and you swap that, take that out, you lose all your links. There's nothing left. You got to go back and relink everything. And in here, each of these blocks, because they're separate components, they're separate function blocks, if you remove a ZIO, it's not going to affect your links. So within these components that are part of a ZIO, you tell it which device you're connecting to. Like I might really be using my temperature from my TR-42 instead of my TR-75. So it's just a matter of switching it like that. Change its link. Same thing you say, your system mode is another command you do on your ZIO. Same thing there. And instead of having to go into the ZIO, going into the whatever that the tab is or button to get to the system mode, have your system commands here you can choose and change, as well as which ZIO you're working with. I think that's much easier to work with than it is with what we have in the Spyder programming. Now you don't have a what's the view that you have? They show you the representation of the simulated view, but you don't have something like that with this. But so all your links to the ZIOs are done with these components. You still have your ZIO out here underneath your local device, but you don't do any links directly to it to get the data out of it. Now, there are some pieces in the TR-75 where when you're telling it what your home screen is going to look like, you use the ORDs of those blocks that are within the program so it knows what to display. So you have a link there. And you can set it up so you've got multiple home screens that you can switch between as well on the 71 and 75. And then once you're finished with configuring those, you're going to come in here and say action. Well, if you added a bunch of components for a ZIO, but you didn't tell it which ZIO it was connected to, if you only have one ZIO, you can come in here and say attach unassigned parameters. So all of those, the room temp set point, the system mode, all those blocks will automatically get assigned to that ZIO. Once you finish your configuration of your ZIOs, you'll do a commission. Now, I'm not even sure if I have my addressing correct, but we'll see what happens when I do that. Okay, so it did fail. So let's see what. Oh, they're both set for address 1. That's why. That looks. Does this one have? What is it? The dip switch on the back that does it. So in this one here, I thought this one here you had the. No, this one here you have the. Don't you have a way to do it from the front? No? All right, so I put that together last night, so I obviously fell down on that task, so I can actually do it. But basically, once you finish...
That's picking on you.
That's quite all right. I'm used to that. But once you're finished with, setting things up, you're going to go through and commission them, and it sends its configuration to the ZIOs, and then they should be up and running at that point. And then you also have, like I mentioned, you have that one, I think it was on the local device. So you don't see if this Sylk configuration was downloaded or not, and obviously it's not because of my failure to be prepared on my ZIO.
So if you are setting up your home screen, what you want this thing to look like, the characters on the ZIO are the same.
Yes, the
So
CO itself.
often I will play with the simulation just to make sure it looks the way I want it to look.
Right.
We lose that simulation piece.
Yes, you do.
So
do
you-
that. Yes, trial and error on the screen.
Yeah, we'll have to do it like hardwired, because it's easy to commission. It just takes a moment to right-click action, download to the
Right.
TR device, so.
Okay, so if I did this correctly, I should be able to come back here.
See how I do filter.
Yeah, nice work. Nice work. Covering. Didn't work.
It didn't work anyway, so. I don't know if maybe it wasn't ready, but we'll try one more time. If not, I'm going to skip that. Yep, all right. In a future session, we'll go through that more, but the class for all this is a 3.5-day class. You have 3 days of class, and then the last day, half a day, is a written test or a multiple choice test, and then a lab test that you would take.
Will the contractors be required to take the test?
They're not. Vince, what is the latest on having the requirements for having to go to class and to be certified? We'll get back to Vince on that, and we'll get back. As far as I understand it, it's not required for contractors to have to go to the class and get certified. I would think if you are looking to work with this product, with everything that's involved with it, I think it's well worth it, having been through the class. And it was only the second class they ran, and it's still done very well. But that's how I understand it, and we'll get Vince's input on that, I'm sure, by the time we finish up here today.
Yeah, Frank, I can touch on that right now, guys. I'm not sure I totally agree with Honeywell on this, but Frank is correct. Our authorized systems distribution partners are required to have the training, but the feeling in Minneapolis was that the contractors do not necessarily have to have the training. I don't know why. If I was an independent contractor in the business, I don't know why I wouldn't attend the training, but it doesn't prohibit you from being able to buy the product if you did not, you weren't able to get to the training.
And we plan on running many training sessions on the product as well. I agree with you, Vince. I think that anybody working with the product, I mean, at least having one person within a company go and get certified, I think is well worth the investment. And I think they're going to reap the rewards of more successful project implementation by having done that as well. And
for what it's worth, Frank, I'll be in the near future, I'll be developing, a 1-day CIPer 30 training, similar to what I had done in the past with a 1-day Spyder training, for guys who, for some reason, just can't get away for 3 days at a particular time, but need a little information, a little insight, to get them up and get them started. So I'll be putting that together, I would think in the next month or so.
Right.
Can we?
Okay.
It's George, guys. Can we talk to the level of contractor that can purchase the product and the availability, when they can?
Yeah, you want me to take that one, George?
That would be great.
Directed at you.
Yeah, this is the first time, guys, in my history with Honeywell that there has been a limited distribution strategy for a new product. So the rules of the road here are that in order to be able to purchase this product, you have to be a BCS level contractor or above. BCA contractors, the initial entry level contractors will not be able to purchase this product from their authorized systems distributor. So got to be BCS level or above in order to get this. And also, they have limited the distribution of this product to for the first 90 days to our ACI level contractors. So for the first 90 days, the ACI level have access. After that, the BCS level contractors have access to it. And the old BCA contractors do not have access to it. So this is definitely something that is different and new for Honeywell, and is in response to a lot of feedback that they have received in the industry from our contracting partners across the country.
When does that count start? When do they start counting the days?
They start counting the days when the
start?
product is initially released, which, as far as I know, product is shipping. So that release date will probably the clock's probably ticking at this point, Frank.
Okay. Thank you, Vince. That cover you, George?
Yep, just wanted everybody to know what the release schedule was. Thank you.
Question. All right, I want to jump over to the Spyder to IPC migrator tool. It looks very similar to what you've had back in AX when we were migrating from the older 3. whatever Spyder tool and earlier to the current 4. whatever and forward. But basically, you get to choose whether you're going to be doing a station, a library, an exported library, or a custom palette. And then from there, you choose the directory where you're pulling from, and then it'll list the controllers, or it'll list the stations in this case. Or if you did, exported library, you'd have to go and find where you exported it to. And you hit migrate, and that's all that's necessary. If I look at I have everything underneath, I believe it's in here, Honeywell, no, the drive C. Temp. If you look under here, I've actually done a exported library as well as a station. So if we look at the one I did the station on, this one was a VVT LAN BACnet station. We can look and see the config.bog. Oh, that's the original. So the original station had some LAN devices, and it had some BACnet devices as well. This looks like it must have been a VVT that they showed a LAN system and a BACnet system in there. Then from there, I can go, once you finish your migration, it'll get placed underneath the appropriate folder. So if we look under migrated stations, there's that station. There we go. Okay, so they left the network names the same in there. But you'll see under here, there's a VVT controller. If we go down all the way down, there's the VVT application. It's basically a Venom app that was just migrated. So if we go down and we look for the ZIO, I don't know if this was, it's a conventional one, so that's not what I was hoping for. I was hoping it wasn't a conventional. So let's go to the RTU. Again, this was an RTU okay, this does have one. So you can see the local device would be your 30. It does have an expansion module. And there is a wall module, TR71, that was used. So now if we go under points, and we go see what we have here, you got your RTU, and then you got your logic, and let's see, easier finding it through here. For the points associated with where the ZO is. Because what they do is they make up a folder that's composited and it looks just like a ZO. There it is. So this is what sort of what you would look at in a Spyder as your ZO in your wire sheet. And normally you would right click and you would go to views and you would go to your you would go to the config view to see your ZO. But in this case, because we have these components or these function blocks that are used to represent each of the slots, it's actually all of these are the pieces that would normally be slots on that ZO, and they're all individual components. So it built, when it converted it from Spyder to CIPer 30, it put everything under a folder that was named the same as what the ZO was named in the Spyder logic. And then each of the slots, each of those, what would they be? They would be data from controller. I'm trying to think the name of those slots. But each of those slots now are represented by these here. There's a value from controller is the type of block that this is. And it represents what you saw. So,
Or value from CO or
right.
network variable or...
So it's all done via function or via property sheet rather than on the ZO itself. And in this case, the ZO is pulled away from the actual points, and you have these individual function blocks that are used for it.
Allows you to do the custom numeric.
Yeah, it's all built into here. So if we look and see, here's your enum values, so you can do it's your standard definition for it that you would do here. You know, if it was contractor mode or tenant read only. Labels. You know, there's little labels that are on the front of it. You can choose what labels you want to have turned on or off.
Yeah.
So everything's there that was before, it's just
Different
organized a little
representation.
differently.
Yeah. You know, so if we go and we look at back up there. Great.
You can just have a wedding.
Yeah. And there's a section that any, you know, balancing points that are in there. I guess while that's there, I think about it. There's also going to be a balancing tool that will be part of this. That's something that they're still, I guess, finalizing. So we don't have a defined. That was one of the things we didn't cover in the class because they really didn't have a, what do you want to call it, a rapid balance type of application at this point.
That's an interesting point. When Spyder first came out in 2007, we had these wonderful new VAV controllers with no way to balance them.
Right.
Have we some sort of a end game with balancing?
Yeah, Vince, from what I remember in class, didn't they say that they have a balancing tool for it? It's just, I guess they're polishing it at this point or final tweaks on it?
Yes. I think, Greg, with everything, you know, CIPer, it's kind of like on steroids. So you'll have the same onboard balancing widget that you have in a Spyder right now. You'll also have, with the introduction of this new TS120, you'll have a really nice touchscreen stat that will allow you to balance from that as well. You'll be able to plug into the network anywhere on the network and get to all the controllers and balance from a single place on the network. And what I've been told is some of the enhancements to this as well all the balancing routines will be done with tagging. So by using a certain set of tags on various parts and pieces of the VAV boxes as well as the air handlers that serve it, you would be able to, in the balancing routine, speed up fans, slow down fans, things of that nature, things that you would like to do within the air handler, to enhance the balancing procedure. You would be able to control the air handler as well from the CIPer 30 balancing routine. So I also been told that I don't know if it's in the next release or shortly thereafter, but you'll also be able to do your balancing from phones and tablets and things of that nature as well. So lots of balancing options. I think that the goal here, guys, was to get away from having a program like Rapid Balance where, occasionally you run into issues of having, the wrong version of controller with the wrong version of Rapid Balance. So the goal here was to make things streamlined and simplified.
For the third-party guys.
For the third-party guys, that is correct.
Smart.
So as you can see, to finish up with the migration piece, it's very easy for you to go. If you've got a nice library of applications that you utilize over and over again, it's not going to take much for you to convert it over to be able to use it with the CIPer 30. I mean, if we look at, I'm trying to think of other things we could look at. We go to platform administration on the CIPer 30. You see it's using, it's standard Niagara. It's 47109 is the release that's being used. And it's still using QNX like the Jace is using. I know like the Edge 10 uses, I think it's Linux for its operating system. So keep in mind when you first power up, it's going to take a good 3 minutes to get the station up and running to be able to log in and work with it, or you get your application up and running. That hasn't changed. The processor is not the same as an 8000. It's slightly less, but for what it does, it's very powerful. I don't think there's going to be any problems with that. I'm trying to think of what else. I guess I could open it up for any questions, anything you want to see in the software to look at.
Hey, Frank, the modules, are we able to use like, AX community modules or the Honeywell CL modules? I mean, is it open to all third-party modules, or are we limited in any way?
It's standard Niagara, so that shouldn't be an issue. CL's not standard Niagara module, so I doubt that'll work, because that's got to have a special license to be able to work with the CL stuff. So no, I don't expect the CL modules to work with this. I mean, Vince, you can speak on that if you know anything more on that.
Frank, I'm trying to remember. That's one I'll have to double check on. Half of me wants to say that I heard that they would, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'll have to check.
So it could be something down the road then, because I think it's a special central line license that goes in there for covering that part.
Okay, for the HVAC modules that we use now?
Yeah, because now we can do them with our demo licenses and also with the standard, Web 8000, where before it was only for the Eagle. So they added it to the licensing to work with that, and there's standard stuff in the licensing in here, nothing additional that I could find.
Okay, because I mean, it would be nice to have access to some of that stuff as well.
Right.
I guess
yeah,
that was a wish for Vince.
no, my guess is that would definitely be added, especially since in like the next release or two, they plan on adding the panel bus modules, the regular, XFL, XL800 modules. So it would only make sense to have them included.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a good point, though. Yeah, if we're going to be using those as with the panel bus, then at some point you would think they would allow it.
You should tell them that this is a full Jace in a supervisor.
Yeah, it's a good
Full load point.
I mean, right now, if you were to bring this into a supervisor, because you really wouldn't bring it into a Jace because it's really a Jace in itself, you bring it into supervisor, right now it is going to count as a Niagara device on the license of your supervisor. I know they're in talks of having a mini Niagara device or an edge device license, I guess would be the best way to describe it, so that you're not paying that full price for a full-blown Jace when it's only a plant controller that you're bringing in. But at this point, there is no mechanism for that. And I brought up on the screen the SPY metrics view, just so you can see the global capacity and how it's set up. And this is a standard license. We didn't add anything more to it. And you can see, like, the devices, it's got a license for 4. It's used 1. That's itself, 150 points. And if it has a proxy extension on it, it's going to count towards this. Any other questions? I mean, I could see down the road going into more of you'll learn it in class too. One of the questions that'll come up is, well, I've got 100 VAVs, I need to do this. I got to commission each controller like a Jace individually. That's going to take a long time. Well, one of the big things of with Niagara is you had the provisioning that you can utilize, and you could provision you could set up a batch for doing your configuring and your deploying for each of the devices. So there are tools in place to make that easier. I mean, you'll be able to set it up so when you do when you deploy 100 VAV boxes, you'll set up a spreadsheet that's part of a template, and you probably would want to add your K factor, your min and max flow balancing set points as part of that. So then when you do a deploy, those fields will come up and allow you to make them, or you'll create the spreadsheet so each controller can have its own individual box size, K factor, whatever's required that's different from each of the boxes, so that when you go to deploy it, it'll deploy the right set points for the right boxes. And it's one of those things that'll go out in parallel. It'll just go out, there's 100 of them out there, it'll deploy to all 100. It's not sequential. So it'll try to do each one, and as it moves along, it's not going to stop if one fails. The rest keep going. But you'll be really getting into using provisioning if you haven't already started using provisioning.
Yeah, Frank, and I'd also like to add, from that Thursday I sat in on training, a new step that we'll have to understand and deploy is setting up and creating and signing certificates so that we can be sure that we have a secure IP network for our controllers.
Right. And once you set up the first, then you'll be able to deploy them all without, it actually comes out to be a pretty simple process to go through. It's just doing it the first time. So I guess with that, any questions?
These are all future Tech Tuesdays, right?
Yeah, we'll take deeper dives.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be in each of those different segments. We'll go through and do that. We'll do one on the certificate stuff. That's setting up the certificates within the devices, not for browsers. That's two totally different things. But that's another topic down the road. The, provisioning will be a topic we can do. There's a lot of other things that we can do that apply to this, as well as other things, but,
Evolving product, it's
Right.
brand new.
Yeah, I did a free Tritium lab on the provisioning for like the edge devices, because with the supervisor, you have to accept their certificates on both sides, and looks like it gets...
yeah, this eliminates all that. Yep.
Okay. Is there any future plans for reattaching the actuator for the VAV controllers, or are we done with that type of product?
Jack, it's my understanding that they are looking at that, and also the new controller, I've been told, a newer controller that's an MSTP based controller, which we've called it's had like two names. It's the IRM controller, or it's also been called the Spyder 5. They're looking at a VAV version of that as well to be a competitive fighting model if somebody wants to stay in the MSTP world for VAV control. So yes, there should be a couple VAV options coming in the future as well.
Well, I mean, we have. Are we going to see it? The Spyders fade away? I mean, we already have like a 4022 is a nice size, combined product, easy to install. With the CIPer 30, now I've got my guys installing 2 devices and having to wire over an actuator. Yes,
understood. Yeah, there definitely is talk of mounting an actuator on that, but I don't think, I think we got to the point, Jack, where this CIPer 30 had some delays in it, right? So we got to the point where we're saying we got to get this thing out, and that's something that's definitely going to be looked at in the near future. But exactly when, I don't know. They weren't going to allow that to hold up the introduction of the product. So definitely something that's on the drawing board.
Okay, because I mean, even like there's I/O expansions. It'd be nice if you just had the actuator to snap in. That would actually work.
Explain what you mean there, Jack, with the I/O expansion.
You've got the I/O expansions, the large and the small expansion that can connect directly to the CIPer.
Yes.
So if they could somehow pull off a expansion actuator, that would sort of fit that profile of a combined device.
Oh no, that's a cool idea. Yeah, I just don't know if they would want to do it like they had done with the Spyder, more like a tongue and groove connection, with just a couple concealed, 3 concealed wires running from the controller over to the actuator. But either way, I can let me check up on that and see where they're at with that, and I'll get back to Frank, or I'll get back directly to you and let you know what the thoughts are on that.
Okay. I mean, we're not in a rush to start deploying them, so I'm just really looking down the road. It'd be nice to still have that form factor.
No, I totally understand.
All right. Any other questions? What else do we still have? Jim, Brett, you guys have been quiet. Can't find it. Okay, I guess with that, we can wrap up another Tech Tuesday, and as we usually do, we'll post the video. We'll post the recording up on BP Tech Center and also the PowerPoint that we went through in the beginning. I'll add a couple things to it, and we'll post that as well sometime, hopefully today or tomorrow.
Thank you, Vince, for sitting in today.
Yeah, Vince, thank you very much for your input and for attending this with us.
Oh, no, thanks for the invite, guys. I appreciate it.
And thanks to everybody else for attending as well. If anything comes up, any questions, please let us know. Have a good day.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Have a good 4th. See you.
Yeah, happy 4th, guys. Thank you.